Hello and a warm welcome to this discussion on women and entrepreneurship in developing countries, perspectives from Indonesia, Bangladesh, and India, which is hosted by the Center for New Economic Diplomacy at the Observer Research Foundation. My name is Sunaina Kumar, and I am a senior fellow with ORF. And we have a wonderful lineup of speakers joining us from all three countries that we will be focusing on. Studies show that labor force participation rates have been declining in all economies, especially among women, since the onset of the pandemic. This roundtable will look at the role of entrepreneurship as one of the most important sources of employment for women. Women owned businesses contribute greatly to all economies, and yet most women led businesses are concentrated in the informal sector. They operate as small and medium enterprises and they employ few workers. Women led businesses face barriers in accessing finance and in keeping pace with the new digital economy. The socio-cultural barriers faced by women entrepreneurs are common in every part of the developing world. In India, a majority of women depend on their businesses for survival, and yet 90% of them are not able to access formal sources of finance. Indonesia has done particularly well in promoting women's entrepreneurship. Women own 60% of MSMEs in Indonesia. Bangladesh has done well in promoting women's labor force participation, but when it comes to entrepreneurship, women face huge obstacles in the country. In this discussion, we will look at how developing countries can exchange learnings in promoting women's entrepreneurship. To begin with, I would like to invite our keynote speaker, Ambassador Ina Krishnamurthy, who is Ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia to India, to deliver her address. Before her appointment as ambassador to India, she was advisor to the Minister for Foreign Affairs on economic diplomacy. Ambassador Krishnamurthy has been a tireless advocate for women's rights and their economic and political participation. Ambassador, it is our honor to have you join us and to share your thoughts on this. It's over to you.
Good afternoon. May peace and health be upon us all. Thank you, Mrs. Sunaina Kumar from ORIF, Honorable Speaker. First and foremost, I would like to thank the Center for New Economic Diplomacy, ORF, for inviting me to speak at this auspicious event. Indonesia is very proud to be among developing countries that continuously resilient and agile in their efforts to empower women, in particular the role of women in economic development. All of us, I believe, have seen and experienced firsthand on how women have been the front lines in the response to COVID-19. They have played an enormous role in efforts to flatten the curve of infection and position their nations for economic recovery. Unfortunately, on the other hand, although women are part of the solution, we also have seen that the pandemic has disproportionately affected women. The number of women in business management and leadership positions remain far too low. We have to place women at the center of our interventions and decision making process. As we prepare to move forward and resume our normal lives, albeit through a new normal, I'm certain that economic recovery is high on our agenda. Given our current challenges, we will need all the economic growth, dynamism, and ingenuity we can get in the years ahead. Thankfully, the key part of the solution is staring us right in the face, unleashing the economic power of women, bringing the world's largest excluded group into the fold. On another note, I would like to highlight an important remarks by the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Indonesia, Her Excellency Retno Marsudi. Whenever she was asked about gender empowerment, she always say that men also have important role in achieving gender equality, and promoting women empowerment initiatives. And more importantly, in efforts to elevate women's access to employment, to achieve appropriate working conditions, and to the attainment of women full participation in the decision making process. Ladies and gentlemen, Indonesia is currently the president of G20, a premier economic intergovernmental forum where members work to address major issues related to the global economy. Under G20, there are Women 20 or W20, an engagement group where the objective is to ensure that the gender considerations are mainstream into G20 discussions and translate into the G20 leaders' declaration as policies and commitments that foster gender equality and women's economic empowerment. The W20 presidency of Indonesia wants to encourage the commitment of state government leaders to place gender equality and women's empowerment at the focus of global discussions regarding the post COVID 19 economic recovery. In addition, it also requires a commitment to reduce discrimination against women in order to actively participate in recovery during the COVID 19 pandemic. With that target, the W20 Indonesian presidency for this year will raise four priority issues. First, to promote equality, security, and welfare by eliminating discrimination that hinders women participation in the economy. Second, achieving economic inclusion by supporting MSMEs that are owned and managed by women. Third, addressing vulnerability to increase resilience with a focus on women with disabilities and rural women. And fourth, gender equal health response. Indonesia took the issue of gender equality and women's empowerment as serious matter under its G20 presidency. Among the honorable speaker, we have Ibu Rinawati, which the co-chair of G20 Empowerment Initiative, an alliance for the empowerment and progression on world women's from uh, from the G from from what is this women's economic um, um, of the women economic empowerment. So, anyways, with India as the next president of G20 in 2023, I'm sure that the issue of gender equality and women's empowerment will also be one of the main priority discussions of the presidency of India. Ladies and gentlemen, few highlights on Indonesia. According to the Indonesia's Central Bureau of Statistics, level of women workforce participation in Indonesia is around 53% out of the total women's population. This number has raised from previous years. Indonesian government also encouraged Indonesian women to actively participate in the economic development, including the revolutionary industry 4.0 era, where almost all aspects of daily life has become digitalized, including in economic activities. My government believes that on one side, Indonesian women must be ready to become economically independent and seize the post pandemic digital momentum. And on another side, we also encourage women to not only become a player in the economic sector, like entrepreneurs or MSME, but women should also become the catalyst of job creation in this digitalization era. Few reasons why our efforts to empower women may define the future of our societies. First, women make up more than 70% of global medical workers. As such, they are much more prone to be exposed to deadly diseases. Second, compared to previous crises, the pandemic and current global dynamics hit those at the bottom of the ladder first, and the majority are unfortunately women. These include micro, small, and medium enterprises that are important for women's livelihood, where in most developing economies represent 60 to 70% of jobs. Madam Kumar already mentioned about that. In Indonesia, 64% of MSMEs are managed or owned by women. They are facing production constraints, limited access to finance, supply chain disruptions, and policy uncertainty. Third, many women migrate overseas in search of a better livelihood. They represent a vulnerable yet often overlooked picture on how the pandemic affects women. Fourth, women also tend to be overrepresented in less secure jobs, such as informal, temporary, or part time work. This is partly because they want more flexible work options, and partly because they are locked out of higher status careers. Consequently, most of them are without social and or economy safety net. Ladies and gentlemen, before concluding, although I'm speaking in front of prominent figures who surely know women entrepreneurship than myself, as I believe that their economic contribution forms the very fabrics of the global economy, let me share my thoughts on ways to unleash the economic power and potential of women, in particular women entrepreneurs, enhancing policies, and focusing on attitudes and culture. On the first issue, enhancing policies. First, we need to scale up efforts to empower women entrepreneurs, including enhancing accessibility to finance and capitals. Sustaining liquidity is key. Also vital in expanding access to and capacity on digital economy. And another issue also important is product diversification. Second, and ensuring solutions when there are disruptions to the value chain and expanding the number of those with direct access to it to ensure that it is resilient and sustainable even during crisis. Third, inclusive trade policies that can contribute to advancing women's economic empowerment. And fourth, multiplying sharing of best practices and technical assistance for conducting gender based analysis and gender disaggregated data of trade policy and their impact. On the focus of our attitudes and culture, I believe that the most aptly quote is from Mahatma Gandhi that if you educate a man, you educate an individual. But if you educate a woman, you educate an entire family. And also on what the late External Affairs Minister of India, Madam Sushma Swaraj, may she rest in peace, that it is imperative to make women empowerment a people's movement, unquote. With these two quotes, I would like to close my remarks by again wishing the Center for New Economic Diplomacy Observer Research Foundation a great success in your endeavors and a sincere gratitude and appreciation for your kind invitation to me and the Embassy of Indonesia. Namaste and a very good afternoon to you all.
Thank you, Ambassador Krishnamurthy. You have shared some very important insights and solutions. Thank you also for the advocacy for this subject. It gives us just the right momentum to move to our panel discussion. I'd like to introduce our panelists for today. We have Reenawati Pritanishingi, businesswoman and leader in Indonesia. She is also co-chair of G20 Empower. Sharon Buto is Executive Director at the Research Initiative Lead at Kriya University in India. Ghulam Fazle Rabbani is Enterprise and Employment Development Specialist at Swapno Project at UNDP Bangladesh. And Sachi Bhalla is Senior Program Officer at Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in India. I'd like to begin with you, Sharon, and get from you the perspective on India. You have worked quite a lot on enterprise growth and development, and on financial and digital inclusion. Can you give us the perspective on women's entrepreneurship? What are the barriers women here face, and how are they faring since the pandemic?
Hey, thanks, Sister Nana. Thanks, Ambassador, for a lovely introduction. I think she summarized a lot of us what we were thinking. So let me try to add value, even after Sunana, your introduction. As well, I was recently in Bali for a G20 event as well. So lovely, lovely area. And I learned a lot about a wonderful country. And kudos for the level of women entrepreneurship you have there. I think that's quite a good example to follow. So I think in India in particular, I think there's a couple of other aspects as well that you need to um, that needs to be highlighted. I think there's a few things when you look at women entrepreneurship. It's such a broad segment that you almost have to unpack it in a sense that when you look at and even in this panel, it might be too much, to address some specific solutions. But I think in particular in India, what would really help is sort of like understanding the life journey of an entrepreneur, understanding which solution would be appropriate to encourage entrepreneurship. So if you look at that step, so you need to encourage entrepreneurship. Once they're entrepreneurs, you need to ensure that they can sustain and encourage growth. And within that, you need to have an enabling system. And some of the solutions of this enabling system are, like the ambassador mentioned, it could be regulatory policy, it could be your own community network, it could be including men, anything that will encourage that. So when you look at the life stage of, say, wanting to encourage entrepreneur, the first step in India, I think, would be required is to have a much greater effort of encouraging women to enter entrepreneurship. So there's a few things that need to be addressed. One of the things is often women have little availability. So there's a lot of research, and maybe Sashi, I know Gates has been a lot of work and looking at women's time use. Do they even have time to take entrepreneurial activities? The second question would be, do they even have the attitude? Often they have a low, I guess maybe low risk appetite, but also very apprehensive. There could be safety concerns. There could be a lot of particular society. It's sort of like defying social outcomes that you have to in that environment. So enabling environment also means, how to encourage women to entrepreneurship is also, looking at, well, even if women had time use, even if they had permission from their households, even have enabling, they still have children. So are there systems where, we can encourage women to enter entrepreneurship at whatever life stage they are at, having an ecosystem that, creates or other solutions that help them, free up their time to engage into entrepreneurship activities. The second phase is once you're an entrepreneur, how do you do to encourage people? Ambassador mentioned that, a lot of the women stage at the survival rate. So one of the things I also mentioned, things like when you educate a woman, you educate your household. I think that's true. One of the sad things of women is often people do rely on them to, gain income or give them income because they know they will invest in their family and that will have long-term outcomes. But it also means that women are not able to accumulate wealth over time. So that also means that, eventually if she has a business, she has necessarily no collateral, and as well in usual land is not in her name. So that's one of the things that, over time does not allow her to access appropriate timely finance as required, as much as I would say in general, overall, in the MSME ecosystem in India, there's a very credit gap where a lot of the industry is trying to tap into. But tapping into women is particularly difficult for those reasons, because either it's unsecured loan, which is difficult, they don't get the amount. If it's a secure loan, they don't have enough collateral. The other aspect I would say is access to market. Access to market is one of the very critical ones, I think. And a lot of people have pushed, look, you can produce as much as you want, but where do you sell it? So a lot of these women are hyper-local. The majority of nano enterprises are local, and then you need to define your market. So by definition, they're mostly local nano entrepreneurs that sell in the market otherwise. But there is a potential, I think, that digital brings in terms of doing outreach and things like that. But that also is not a silver bullet. When you think of e-commerce, it has many possibilities, but you also have to think that it's not just about putting your product online. It's like making sure that you understand your segment, making sure you understand social media. And whatever product you have, you actually have to posted somewhere. So that also means understanding the logistics of transport. So I think that there's much more work to help women link to markets on the whole ideation supply chain of it. I think that's a work in progress to help them also, optimally utilize, resources that are available to them digitally to their level. So I can give an example in some of the work where we have an incubation network where we encourage women who tailor to go through social media and do their work. So one woman who was very vibrant, charismatic, and we took permission from her household, and suddenly, within 10 minutes, she had an order for 100 saris. So obviously, this is just initial success stories, but then she has to negotiate, a fabric cost, go and deliver these saris. C, she has to understand customer retention. How do you go about that? So that's the whole aspect of it. I think the regulatory environment as well is critical. And one thing that is missing in India, and probably otherwise, is access to networks and mentors. These are key things that really encourage entrepreneurship. So, Serena, I don't know how much time I have. I can talk long talk on this topic, but I'll let my other colleagues on the panel also probably carve out the area where they want to intervene. So I hope my contribution would be
Thanks, Sharon. That actually gives us quite an overview of all the barriers and also what has worked. I was quite intrigued by the example that you gave us of the woman who scaled up her business with the digital intervention. It's something that I want to, in fact, return to in the next round to you. I'd now like to turn to Reenavati. I first want to ask you about your role as co-chair for G20 Empower, the G20 Alliance for the Empowerment and Progression of Women's Economic Representation. What do you think is the role that a multilateral forum like G20 can have in promoting women's entrepreneurship? And how can countries work together on this agenda?
Thank you, Sunaina. G20 Empower, an alliance that is uniquely positioned between private sectors and government, that enabling us to be action-driven and deliver results in alignment to meet Brisbane goals. I'm Reenawati Prihatiningsi, also with Yesi Yoseta. We are co-chairing G20 Empower initiative along with the government representative Economy. Under Indonesia presidency, priority issues from previous presidency is reinforced through monitoring progress on female leadership in the private sector. What we call it accountability for G20 Empower KPIs implementation. We produce recommendation and concrete deliverables to ensure measurements of KPI in supporting women leadership. Together with ILO, OECD, a dashboard in measuring the agreed KPI will be released annually. Leveraging advocates network or ambassador of women leaders from all G20 member countries, we aim to have the multiplier effect in accelerating women's leadership. Not only women's ambassador, but also we also currently recruit more advocates to really amplify our messages. We do have playbook of more than 250 best practices that can immediately be implemented by private sectors. G20 Empower also strengthen priority issues by addressing women in MSMEs as a nexus of economic recovery. In this, we produce a draft recommendation that can be taken by private sector to support the involvement of women in small and medium enterprises. Further, coordinated effort that includes increasing public-private sector cooperation in supporting women MSMEs, increasing access to finance of women in MSMEs, and setting policy to enable more women in MSMEs. And lastly, building a future-ready economy through upskilling and digital enablement. We have managed to achieve several milestones in the past 7 months. We finished two plenary meetings in that focus on the first two priority issues. On them was held in hybrid manner in Yogyakarta and attended by the Indonesia's ministers of women empowerment and child protections and ministers of cooperative and MSEs and many of our advocates, partners, as well as delegates. 3 co-chairs meeting along with 2 side events, ensuring collaboration with other countries by doing several joint collaboration like producing G20 Empower 2022 playbook, continuation of the previous year's playbook. Moving forwards, we also have several more agenda in place. The third side event will be held on July 26th, followed by the last plenary that will focus on the last 3 key priority issues about building a future-ready economy through upskilling and digital enablement. The fourth and the last co-chairs meeting prior to the ministerial conference, and then wrapping all the programming and discussion by presenting the communique during the ministerial conference on August 20 to 26 in Bali. All of these, of course, won't be achieved in such a short time without the joint collaboration between G20 Empower Committee, Indonesian government, and also all G20 countries, members, partners, international organization. So we are very excited to launch the remaining program that we have, and we will continue to support, to thrive and support each other in order to make G20 Indonesia presidency be successful one. So that's about the, thank you for the opportunity, Sunaina, to share our progress. So if you like to to understand further or discuss, I'm happy to answer.
So, Gulam, if we can turn to you and find out from you about Bangladesh, the fact that of course, the garment sector has contributed greatly to increasing women's labor force participation. But when it comes to entrepreneurship, Bangladesh has in fact been ranked consistently at the bottom of the list. So what do you think is the reason for that? What are the barriers that women face? And also in terms of interventions that you have seen that have worked on the ground.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you, Sunana, inviting me to join this event. I'm only one male member among you, so thanks to all. And yes, this is a very interesting event, and to learn the cross-country reflection. So in Bangladesh, basically, yes, you are right. In terms of labor force, we did good in RMG sectors. So in terms of women entrepreneurship, so Bangladesh has a lot of challenge the women are facing in especially in grassroots levels, and I think the women challenge of women entrepreneurship almost same as Sharon shared, the ambassador shared the experience from India and Indonesia. And in Bangladesh, basically, we know the cultural barrier of family and society cultural barrier. Um, uh, One thing I want to share, that is the unpaid care workload, which is we saw from our interventions, that is the most burden for women to think beyond their family box. So besides those, there are some generic issues in the country perspective, because that traditional educational system, female are not interested to get some vocational training educations. Therefore, they try to get general educations, and after that they try to get married. So still in Bangladesh, the early marriage is the most prominent barrier for women empowerment, not in terms of entrepreneurship, for service sector as well. If I share a statistics with you, like the age of 15 to 24 years old of female, education rate is 81%, and among this group, 72% women got married at the age of 24. But 75% of female entrepreneurs who whose age in between 30 to 50 years. So it reflects the entrepreneurs who try to get the female entrepreneurs who try to get something new. They are not started their journey before marriage. So they started their journey after marriage, and that is the generic barrier for women. So this is a issue in I think all the country we are facing, as well as the lack of capital. This is common for all. I try to say another thing is, in our country like India, Bangladesh, women are involved in basically the food processing, handicrafts industry, but at present the big companies are captured those markets. So the women entrepreneurs who try to start from their home, from their with a little startup fund, they have to face the competition with the large market. That is the most challenging for those startups, for those small entrepreneurs. So for those reasons, women entrepreneurs are now try to focus on e-commerce platform, mostly on F-commerce. And during the pandemic situations in Bangladesh, about 400,000 women involved in the F-commerce, and they did very good in their arena. And the digital financing system is also helpful for them. UNDP Bangladesh in 2020, the UNDP introduced a platform for women entrepreneurs, e-commerce platform, Anando Mela, and currently there are about 1,500 women entrepreneurs access in these platforms. They have all sort of digital services. They can pay their transaction through the DFS, through the SSL commerce. So those the way the women are trying to get out, and this is the area where the women need more support in terms of their if we think the we need to resolve their some basic some basic area. One thing I want to share.
Perhaps we can return to you in the second round. Thank you so much, Gulam. I would like to turn to our next guest now and bring in Sachi and hear from her in terms of how the pandemic has affected the work that you do at the Foundation on Gender Equality. What are the new priorities that have emerged, and is women's entrepreneurship one of them?
Thanks, Sunena, and it's great to be on this panel. I think we've heard some really interesting perspectives and also the evidence that has been shared by Sharon, by Gulab, by Ambassador, very clearly highlighting the challenges that are being faced by women entrepreneurs. I think for the Gates Foundation, women's economic empowerment has been a key priority for us over the past few years. We have invested in understanding the evidence behind what drives, what promotes women's economic empowerment, and I think there very clearly for us what emerged as a priority. And this is pre-pandemic, but I think very much so driven home. Post the pandemic, is the importance of women's collectives. So let me speak to that for a couple of minutes. What we find is that when women come together, there is a lot of there is empowerment that happens as they start working together. So when we talk about agency, when we talk about how do we actually support women to grow, the collectivization process itself is empowering. We work with the National Rural Livelihoods Mission in India. The program itself works to collectivize women and to support them through credit and market linkages. So in a sense, the program itself is focused on women's social and economic empowerment. And it is a program which is very much directed at women. It is a women-led program. And over the past few years, I would say the way that gender equality, a gender lens, and women's empowerment has been integrated into the program is really amazing. Similarly, we also work with an organization called SEWA, the Self-Employed Women's Association, which has been working in India for many decades now. And again, very, very clearly from there, the experience of the collective social enterprises in this case, comes across to us in terms of its empowerment and in terms of how women actually support each other, and beyond just the enterprise space, are able to take that leadership even in society. The ambassador also mentioned the role that women have played in responding to the pandemic. They really have been at the front line. Maybe I'll say one thing more before I pause. Sharon spoke about the importance of capacity building and really looking at how women's enterprises face challenges, whether it is with market access and at times with even accessing digital platforms. We do have data around what is peer effect, and this is data that's coming from across countries, the presence of role models and the building of peer networks, which actually support women to be able to, one, of course, come in, access trainings, access programs, especially when they're coming with a peer of choice. Second, in Ahmedabad, there was a field study which was done where women, half participants were participated in a training session where they were allowed to attend sessions with a peer or friend of their choice, and the other half attended by themselves. Those who attended with a peer displayed a higher likelihood of borrowing from banks and dedicating that money towards business activities. And that actually went forward with these women reporting higher volumes in business, more detailed business plans, and an increase in revenue. So you really sort of see the impact that one can have when you are supporting women along with other women. I can also speak to another program where gig platforms or the platform economy, there have been experiments around how do you actually support women to be able to access more gig jobs. And again, over there, when women are paired with either come in as a couple or with a peer of choice, there is a higher uptake of jobs. So I think very clearly for us, the learning is the importance of the collective, the importance of peer networks, the importance of role models, and we hope to continue taking some of those lessons forward.
That's fascinating. Also, the study that you cited about women who went with peers ended up borrowing and setting up businesses. I'm going to turn to Sharon now. Sharon, you have looked at digital solutions for women's economic inclusion in your research. What role can technology play in supporting women's businesses? And are women in India benefiting from the new digital economy, or would you say they are being left out of it?
That's a huge, huge question. So I think the first thing is you need to have access to a phone. That's you need to have the agency. Often the phones are utilized within the household. It's a shared phone. So and there's been a lot of work in some of our teams and as well as some parallel teams within our Kriya ecosystem that is look at that access to phone. You also need to have an understanding of the phone and how to optimize it. So we've seen a bit of research where, if the woman has access to a cell phone, and like Sashi mentioned, peer networks are people in your environment that are enabling you. So women who have teenage sons tend to be a little bit more active, people to train them. That is the reality when you look at change agent models at home and the second one. The second thing is that there's several ways where they can utilize phone. Our experience has been that with some training, some people really get on. There's an example that we're doing actually with DMGF on this hard hashtag model, which is enabling, they are selecting among women's collective, women who are well trained, who have a phone, and they provide other training that allows them to sort of like create a livelihood out of that. So this is a model where women go in villages and they seek about looking at this last mile government scheme problem. So they're sort of like their mini entrepreneur. So they go and they see within the village and seek people who would pay to figure out what access they have to government schemes. And this is all through the phone. So they will ask like, what are the schemes you're eligible? And they'll tell you the 10 schemes, and they'll also enable it through the phone. So this is one way where, women are train on that. The other way is women home-based business. So this is a way where people could actually access markets better. And this is a case where what I mentioned, that it's not just a matter of putting your product online actually, because that doesn't work well. So when you look at the data from these Amazon and these Shaheli and all these other ones, it's also, you need to understand where to market. You need, even women, sometimes they need training on understanding what picture you can put online. They might not have access to that. Design, how to put your project, how to establish yourself. And with digital as well, when you want to access market, you need to understand product quality, pricing, product differentiation, because you're accessing this big market. So while you can't train women on a range of things, you can start helping them locally to understand how they can access those aspects. Digital can also enable women to understand how to get better prices for the raw materials. So we saw some cases where women started to understand, I can get a coupon here or I can negotiate. We saw some WhatsApp platform. There is also an example where I remember where we wanted to encourage women in a small area in Jaipur, in this Bata Basti, sort of like more slummish area. And what happened is that women came for their husband for the training on digital, but they weren't as active. But one of my field staff discovered that they were creating a WhatsApp group. So she asked to be part of that WhatsApp group, and she discovered that women got really interested in digital because they understood that they can save money. So one woman figured out coupons, and this was a WhatsApp in Hindi, so I couldn't follow through. So one was very key on finding these online coupons, and then they get really on board on understanding use cases, because you can't expect a woman who's never used digital to suddenly be digital savvy for her business. So you have to make sure that she has A, an incentive to learn, and B, several use cases and someone to handhold her as well and to train her. The other thing is as well access to internet and electricity as well. So internet, I think with the advent of 5G that's going on in the village with BSNL, I think that will be a big game changer, where you'll see many more people encouraged, because even when we were trying to look at how people can access digital payments or pay with their UPI and things like in villages, even those who wanted to, they had that interruption in the internet. So I think that will ecosystem game changer. That's probably one of them. UPI as well is something that facilitates e-commerce. It makes it easier as well to work on it. So I would say digital, yes, there's many possibilities, but it also poses a whole set of challenges. that I also think that needs to be tailored and solution. The other thing that digital can also help build a capacity of women, like Sashi mentioned, but it has to be bite-sized, just some time information, and it has to be in vernacular language. So that actually would increase the accessibility of women, because we know for a fact that women use entertainment among those, like social media. So if she can access, information with regards to her business in language that she's familiar, and and one of the most famous training in finance was this rules of thumb, where it's simple, bite-sized information that women can digest. So if that's put on a digital platform to learn, that's in their language, that's facilitate that. So overall, broad answer to something complex, yeah.
Yes, that does cover it. Gulam, Sachi had actually just spoken about the National Rural Livelihoods Mission in India, which works specifically as a program focused on women's collectives. So, the project that you are associated with, the Swapno Project, is also a gender based social security project. And one part of it has also been to support women in building sustainable livelihoods after their participation in the project. Can you tell us a bit about the learnings from that on enhancing women's businesses?
Sorry, Sumana, can you repeat your last sentence? Last word, please.
Sure. My last bit was if you can share the learnings from the Swapno project on enhancing women's businesses in Bangladesh on your project.
Okay, so basically, Swapno we targets the rural vulnerable women, most disadvantaged women who have no access to finance, access in markets. So UNDP currently target those women groups who are basically out of focus from the all type of agencies in countries. So Swapno project targets those women to build their capacity first, to give them the learnings on businesses skills and entrepreneurship skills. Then the project tie up them with the different agencies, like if we sustain their livelihood or their enterprise, Swapno basically figure out the group enterprise, social business, promote the social business through the cooperative, and try to connect them with the government systems like Bangladesh Small and Cottage Industries under Ministry of Commerce, with the Joita Foundation. This is the supports mechanism. The foundations provides the technical supports, the other facilities to the female entrepreneurs. Also tie up with them the financial institutes and the business incubators who support them for the long run. And for financial institutes, the UNDP provides them for collateral guarantees, credit guarantees, and advocate with the financial institutes to be to redesign the product, financial product and services. Also, we have, as UNDP introduced the platform, e-commerce platform. So we also develop their capacity on operating the e-commerce and the mobile services and the apps, how they can contact with the customers, how they can showcasing their product, as Sharon said, which is the basic literacy for digital commerce. And the most important thing is the gateway system, payment gateway system. So currently, the project is project facilitated them through the mobile financing service and the agent banking system. So through that way, we are connecting them with the government support systems, with the financial institutes, develop their capacities on digital literacies and e-commerce operations, and provide them some uh, uh, technical supports, provide them training on business skills, and most important thing is we follow up them for 2 to 3 years during basically the duration of startup phase. So that's the way we are trying to develop the local employment through our project. So far, 800 women are uh, locally getting jobs through the enterprise initiatives, and our another intervention is to develop the productive age group women, their skills, vocational skills, as they can get access in job in the for formal sectors like garment sectors, leather sectors, and light engineering sectors. So that's the way the project and UNDP try to develop the women entrepreneurship.
Thank you so much, Gulam. Sachi, last thoughts from you. We heard, in fact, from Gulam right now how different stakeholders are working together to make this project possible. What is this policy support? Again, it's a slightly wide question and a two-part question for you, but in terms of policy, what do you think would really help more women take up entrepreneurship in India? And also, the second part of this, how do you think governments can work with the non-government sector and involve the private sector for this mandate?
Sunaina, sorry, your voice was echoing, so I didn't catch the second part of your question.
Okay, so how can the government work with the non-government sector and the private sector on this mandate?
Thanks, Sunaina. I've been thinking of, through this panel, been thinking about one particular sort of intervention that can really be supportive of women's enterprises. Procurement and market access is a huge area. Just globally, data that the World Bank has looked into, there are trillions of dollars of economic activity that happens across the world. And public procurement in particular accounts for around 12% of global GDP. And in many developed countries, even up to 30 to 40%. And yet only 1% of this is spent annually on women's enterprises. In India, also, we have a public procurement policy which encourages procurement from MSMEs, and even a proportion of that is meant to be procured from women's enterprises. And I think that's a huge opportunity. We know that women continue to face challenges in even being able to access public procurement markets. But even then, the government e-marketplace exists, the GEM portal exists, where enterprises can be registered, and public procurement can happen through the GEM portal. And GEM has actually made additional efforts to ensure that women's enterprises are able to register onto the portal. There's much more, I think, in this area that can potentially be done. One, I think, identifying what are the sectors in which women's enterprises are clustered, and how can we improve public procurement as well as private procurement, for that matter, from women's enterprises in those sectors. I think that is one big area of opportunity. The second area that I just mentioned, and that's sort of again, both public and private initiatives can play a big role over here. Looking at business training programs for micro and small enterprises. A recent meta-analysis of, I think, more than 15 studies on business training found that training increases profits and sales on average by 5 to 10%, in particular when these trainings are incorporating elements of gender, looking at how women entrepreneurs can be, their awareness can be raised about what sectors are actually growing and where should they think about setting up their businesses. So I think these are a few areas that both public and private sector can come together and play a role. And then lastly, I think Sharon spoke to this a little bit. We have digital platforms, we have marketplaces. Again, I think there are efforts at this point. I would say there are small scale efforts that aggregate e-marketplaces aggregators are making, that bringing in a gender lens, specifically looking to understand the challenges that women's enterprises face and then addressing those. And that requires specific expertise. I think we should recognize and we should encourage the inclusion of gender experts when we are thinking about how to improve women's labor force participation or opportunities for women's enterprises. So I think that's a conscious decision, and I think that is what is really going to shift the way the sector is at the moment and provide more opportunities and resolve challenges and barriers for women's enterprises.
I would now like to ask you about your work in training and mentoring small and medium enterprises to scale up and build up capacity. What have you observed and what can be done to assist the growth of women's entrepreneurship?
Yeah, after so many years mentoring our sisters in the small, micro, small, medium enterprises, I can highlight that most of them not ready yet. Of course, amidst the barriers, challenge we have discussed previously with all the speakers, to survive and progress as women entrepreneurs, we have to understand that we will go through business cycles from startup, growth, maturity, transition, and succession. We shall be armored. I think what I would like to highlight is the business plan. Sometimes we forgot that to run a business, we need a business plan. It's like Compass or Google. I should not mention that. Okay, like a roadmap for us to take our business where we want to go by mapping these details. That what I would like to share with our participants. That it can help guide every decision we make, whether we have been in business for years or just getting started. Creating or updating a business plan is an essential activity for a long-term success. So it has an overview. So when we have a business plan, we know our product, we know our service, we know how much money we expect to make. The business plan will also tell the story of why our company started. So when we know this, we as a woman can convince our partner, let's say our husband, I have very good idea that I can make business work and I can be a successful one. But sometimes this business plan we forgot about. So there are 2 points. Besides the business plan, is we have also that we have a clear picture on our business, so that when we have the business plan, we can convince our partner, a bank, community about our what we are doing. So what about the second part, really important for MSMEs to grow, is the networking. Of course, we have all kind of variables, but I would like to highlight 2 points here: business plan and networking. So Naina, maybe we remember what Helen Keller once said, that Alone, we can do so little. Together, we can do so much. So by joining organization, I joined IWAPI, Indonesian Women Entrepreneurs Associations, for the past 8 years. And I also joined the Indonesian Business Chambers of on Commerce and Industry for the past 7 years. Through these networks, so I think in India or in Bangladesh, there are so many networks our sister can join. Through these networks, I have an access, opportunity, and I get also the participation, monitoring, and benefit of development projects. Not only that, it served me to give back to the society, and I'm able to share with you, Sunaina, and also get insights from other speakers because I join all these kind of networks. And also, I also receive and get the best practices from other speakers, great people like you.
So I love how there are echoes that are coming out from this discussion on the importance of networking, the importance of collectives. So I'm going to request all of the speakers, if they have quick thoughts as we near the end of this discussion. Sharon, if you have anything to conclude this with, I'll then turn to Ghulam and Sachi if you'd like to add anything at the end.
No, I think one thing we've not tapped into is I think all of these problems are great. I think the intersectionality of all of them is something that we need to think how to tackle best because they're all related. So it's like a Jenga game in a sense. So I think when you talk about gender, looking at the intersection of issues, their environment, their time use, their availability, defining social expectations, accessing markets, I think that's key. And it's one of these wicked problems that are a bit complex that everybody knows around it, but how to tackle them, I think.
Ghulam? You're on mute.
Sorry. Thank you for this nice event, and all the issues have already discussed very clearly. So my last word is that for women entrepreneurship, promoting the women empowerment. If we think about only for country perspective, that might be challenging. So we also have to think cross-border coordinations and the trade facilitation issues. So how can Indian women entrepreneurs interact with the Indonesian or Bangladesian women entrepreneurs, and what the policy the government can facilitate for those countries, because those countries are almost similar ranked in the women entrepreneurship. So that's the most important thing I want to share finally. Thank you. Thank you for joining me.
Sachi?
Thanks, Sunena. I think I'll just sum up by saying encouraging entrepreneurship amongst women is actually not just going to increase women entrepreneurs, but also becomes a way of increasing more jobs for women. So I think looking at that the sector as being a job creating sector is also important. And I think there was a recent study by Bain and Company that projected that India can potentially create many million jobs by 2030 by tapping into the women entrepreneurship sector. And so I think that's something that one should also keep in mind, that this is an initiative or a space that is actually going to have multiple benefits for economic growth, for gender equality, and of course for women's labor force participation.
So I think already mentioned with by other speakers, Sunaina, women and girls represents half of the world population and therefore also half of its potential. Gender equality, besides being a fundamental human right, is essential to achieve peaceful societies with full human potential and sustainable development. Moreover, it has been shown that empowering women spurs productivity and economic growth. We can start from our home, communicate with our family, family and these issues, and we can break the bias, we can break the stereotyping that which is really hinder our growth, our full potential. Get support to break the bias, the glass ceiling. Individually, we all are responsible for our own thoughts and actions all day, every day. So it is paramount importance to end the multi-form of gender violence and secure equal access to equality education, health, economic resources, and participation in political life for both women and girls and men and boys. It is also essential to achieve equal opportunities in access, employment, and to position of leadership and decision-making at all levels. Thank you, Sunaina.
Thank you very much for this really rich discussion. Women and entrepreneurship in developing countries is a topic that we at CNET plan to stay with and will be doing a lot more research and discussions on. I want to thank each of our speakers for sharing so many solutions and insights that that we actually have. We can base a lot of research just on this. Thank you to Sharon, to Sachi, to Ghulam, to Reenavati.